Welcome to the Ohio Individual Service Plan Overview Training. This is part 1 of a 3-part training. Part 1 will serve as a brief overview of the Ohio ISP. Part 2 will expand upon this information, and Part 3 will be more extensive and in-depth. Before we begin, we would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone involved in the Ohio ISP process. We appreciate your time and dedication to the planning process. Note that you must complete Part 1 before you are able to advance to Part 2, and completion of Part 2 is required before advancing to Part 3. The takeaways for the Part 1 training include why the change to a single assessment and plan was necessary, and key principles and concepts that are part of the Ohio ISP. In Part 2, we'll review information related to the Ohio ISP interface and IT platform. And finally, Part 3 will focus on multiple topics including person-centered planning, the importance of outcomes and monitoring, trauma-responsive care, and self-advocacy, among many other important topics. Before moving forward, it is important to take a moment to review how the process worked prior to the Ohio ISP. As Carl Sagan once said, "You have to know the past to understand the present." Our system includes 88 counties and over 400 ICFs, leading to a lack of standardization. ICF stands for Intermediate Care Facility, which is a licensed residential setting option of 4 or more individuals that offers a package of services including 24-hour staffing. This training is not just about a single plan, but also about how standardization brings systemic change. Prior to the Ohio ISP, there were potentially over 500 different ways for plans to look. The previous process did not support the person, but rather it supported the system. There were various inefficiencies due to repetitive processes and planning tools. The process was not streamlined to make efficient use of time, reducing the amount of time available to spend with people who receive support. Compliance issues existed for a variety of reasons, such as the assessment and plan not aligning, the plan not being updated timely when changes occurred, plans not being shared, and feedback from all team members not being taken into consideration. Previously, the plan did not follow the person. If a person moved, it would often restart the process and cause some of the history to be lost. County-to-county transfers could be a challenge even within the same system. Some plans could be difficult to understand and implement. With no consistency or structure, it could be confusing for a provider working in 2 separate counties or staff working at 2 separate ICFs to know where or how to find information in the plan. We know that change in life is inevitable, and we must continue to adapt to ensure the best possible systems, supports, and services for people with developmental disabilities. While developing the Ohio ISP, several town hall meetings were conducted to understand the hopes and fears that the field had surrounding a single service plan. Here you can see a word cloud with the larger words representing the more frequent responses. Some of the more common hopes expressed by the field included person-centered, simplicity, consistency, easier for providers, easier to understand, reader-friendly, training, role requirements, less repetition, and easier for people supported. Some of the more common fears expressed by the field included not person-centered, long, frequent changes, IT issues, lack of information, time-consuming, and not applicable to all. It is interesting to note that many of the fears were directly opposite of the hopes. The town hall feedback was used to develop the Ohio ISP. Feedback regarding the Ohio ISP continues to be collected to improve the process and system. So, what are the underlying principles that define why the move to a standardized assessment and plan? These key principles are driven by DODD's core values: kindness, empathy, collaboration, transparency, innovation, quality, inclusiveness, and accountability. Now that we have clarified the key principles and explained why standardization was necessary, let's move on to the concepts found in the Ohio ISP. The concepts of team process, person-centered thinking, person-centered planning, and person-centered practices are the framework for the Ohio ISP. It all begins with focusing on the person, not just the services. It is not about existing services, but more about the supports the person needs. Plans and assessments change as the person's life changes, and all DD systems utilize the same process. Using these key principles as a foundation, we will briefly review some familiar concepts that are central to this process. Let's begin with what team process has to offer the Ohio ISP. It is the team that puts person-centered thinking and planning into practice. Teams are essential to driving the standardized Ohio ISP. The members important to the team process are the person supported, a parent, guardian, or advocate, the provider and other people who are important to the person supported, and you, the QIDP or SSA. You are key to ensuring the team is connected through ongoing conversation. Building relationships with all team members is vital to assessment and planning. By doing this, you ensure that those who know the person best are the ones providing input to create an Ohio ISP that is meaningful to the person. Although individual teams may function differently, each team will continue to have the same shared goal: to improve the quality of life for the person. Teams continue to use creative ways to get information, and in part 2 of this overview, creative ways the Ohio ISP process assists to gather information will be shared. Everyone on the team has a valuable role to play. Some roles may vary, but all members will work together to help the team stay focused on the person supported and ensuring their Ohio ISP reflects what they want and need. Finally, it is important to acknowledge that the Ohio ISP process is an ongoing planning commitment made by the team to the person supported. In the same way that the team process remains important, so does the team's person-centered thinking. Despite being a standardized process, person-centered thinking is embedded into the Ohio ISP tools and processes to help the team. During Part 2, you will see the presence of person-centered thinking in several ways. The Ohio ISP process, assessment and plan prompts the entire team to discover what the person finds important, to respectfully address significant issues in the person's life, focus on the opportunities the person wants out of life, and to listen carefully while helping people supported make their own choices about services and outcomes. Likewise, person-centered practices are essential. Ohio is committed to person-centered practices in all areas of service delivery. The Ohio ISP is a standardized person-centered approach that encourages the team to focus on the person during assessment and planning. During Part 2 of this overview, you will see how the Ohio ISP looks at services and supports in the context of what the person wants, what matters to them, what it takes to support the person's health and safety needs, and how to best create experiences that help the person have and live the life they want. Here you see the 6 essential elements of person-centered planning. Themes should ensure that plans are respectful and empowering, that a trauma-responsive approach is used, and that they make connections throughout the plan. Plans should also be detailed and thorough, and have clear outcomes and experiences. And finally, plans should provide clear descriptions of services. Be sure to check out the 6 essential elements of person-centered planning self-review tool on the Ohio ISP webpage. You can use this tool to reflect upon the quality of Ohio ISPs when it comes to person-centered planning. The impact of trauma has become a significant focus for DODD, having trauma sensitivity as an essential element of person-centered planning highlights the importance of trauma in the life of a person and in the ways services are to be delivered. Let's take a few moments to provide a brief overview of trauma-informed and trauma-responsive approach. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration developed the 3 E's in their concept of trauma. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, individual trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the person's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. The focus on events places the cause of trauma in the environment, not in some defect of the individual. This is what underlies the basic credo of trauma-informed approaches. It's not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. Events can be a single event, a series of events, or chronic conditions. Individuals may experience it directly, witness it, or feel threatened hearing about an event that affects someone they know. The focus on experience highlights the fact that not every child or adult will experience the same events as traumatic. The identification of a broad range of potential effects reminds us that our response must be holistic. It's not enough to focus on symptoms or behaviors. Our goal is to support a child to learn and grow or an adult to live a satisfying life. A trauma-informed approach incorporates important trauma principles into the organizational culture. The 4 key assumptions for a trauma-informed approach are the 4 R's. Realize, recognize, respond, and resist re-traumatization. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, a program, organization, or system that is trauma-informed realizes the widespread impact of trauma and understands potential paths for recovery, recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients, families, staff, and others involved with the system, and responds by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices, and seeks to actively resist re-traumatization. The ODD is confident that adding a trauma-informed and responsive approach will enrich the person's quality of services, calm the environment in which services are delivered, and more importantly, improve the overall quality of life for the person while at home, at work, and in their neighborhood. The ODD appreciates your time and attention during this overview of the Ohio Individual Service Plan. Be sure to continue to Part 2 of the overview. Thank you.